It was at the dinner table, not a holiday, just an ordinary evening. The plates were already half empty, and the conversation had picked up speed somewhere between the second serving and someone's phone lighting up. You cleared your throat slightly. Not loudly, just enough. You were about to say something about the house repairs, or the doctor's appointment, or maybe the car they were thinking of buying. You had experience with all of it, but your son started speaking over you, not intentionally, not aggressively, just faster. Confident, certain. Someone nodded at him. Your daughter glanced down at her phone while he talked. Not disrespectfully, just distracted. You leaned back. Your hand rested near your glass of water. You told yourself, it's fine. You let him finish. Then the topic changed, and no one circled back. You didn't feel anger. You didn't feel insulted. What you felt was quieter than that. You felt replaced. Not in a dramatic way. Not announced. Not spoken aloud. Just shifted slightly to the side. And what you never said out loud that night was this: I used to be the one they looked at first. And maybe what unsettled you wasn't that they interrupted. It was that no one noticed they did. There's a particular kind of silence that comes later in a man's life. It isn't loud. It doesn't protest. It simply observes. And if you've been noticing this shift not once, but repeatedly, then something deeper is happening. Not outside of you, but around you. And that change has a very specific shape. There was a time when decisions paused until you spoke. It wasn't forced. It wasn't demanded. It was natural. At family gatherings, someone would eventually turn and say, "What do you think?" Even if they didn't follow your advice, they asked. At the hardware store, younger men listened when you explained which tool lasted longer. At the doctor's office, the nurse directed explanations toward you. You were not louder than everyone. You were steadier, and steadiness used to carry weight. Now, something has altered. Conversations move quickly. Opinions are formed before you enter them. Plans are made in group chats you are added to after the fact. You notice it most in small moments. When someone finishes your sentence but gets it slightly wrong. When your story is shortened midway because we get the idea. When the bill arrives and someone else reaches for it first, without looking at you. None of these moments are dramatic, but together, they form a pattern. A quiet relocation, from center to edge. You sat in the waiting room last month. The television mounted in the corner was too loud. A morning news anchor speaking quickly about something urgent that wouldn't matter tomorrow. A young couple sat across from you. The man asked the receptionist questions. His voice carried confidence, the kind you used to recognize in yourself. When your name was called, the nurse directed her instructions toward your daughter, even though you were the patient. She didn't mean harm. She assumed. You answered anyway, calmly, clearly, but you saw it in your daughter's posture. She leaned forward as if she were responsible for translating you. You didn't correct her. You let it pass, but something inside you registered the shift. You are still capable, still aware, still present. Yet the room subtly arranged itself around the assumption that you are less central. And the hardest part, no one announces this transition. There is no ceremony where a man is told, you are now advisory only. It just happens, in fragments. There was a time when your phone rang because someone needed your judgment. Now it rings because someone is updating you. Just letting you know. Just wanted to inform you. You listen. You nod. Even on the phone you nod. And you say, that sounds fine, because it does sound fine. You are not disagreeing. But there was a subtle emotion in that phrasing. From consultant to recipient. From decision maker to audience. And you would never admit this out loud. But sometimes after those calls, you sit quietly for a few minutes longer than necessary. Not upset. Not bitter. Just adjusting. The interruptions are rarely cruel. They're efficient. You begin telling a story from years ago about the old neighborhood, the way things were built differently. Halfway through, someone says, yeah, back when things were simpler. They compress your memory into a sentence. They mean well, but what they don't understand is that you weren't just telling a story. You were re-entering a time when your presence shaped outcomes, when your effort directly changed circumstances, when your word carried consequence. Now the pace of conversation does not linger there long. And so you fall quiet again, not defeated, just aware. There is something deeply human about being the first voice consulted. It isn't about ego. It's about placement. Being first means being foundational. When that shifts, a man doesn't collapse. He recalibrates. But recalibration has a private cost. Because the world rarely thanks a man for stepping back gracefully. It simply adjusts around his silence. And if he is dignified, and most men your age are, he will not compete for attention. He will not raise his volume. He will not demand acknowledgement. He will observe, and that observation becomes heavier over time. Last month at the gathering, you noticed something small. The seating arrangement had changed. You used to sit at the head not formally, just naturally. This time, a younger relative occupied that chair. No one planned it. It just happened. You took a seat along the side. You told yourself it didn't matter, and it didn't. But symbols matter, even when we pretend they don't. You watched the conversation flow. You smiled at the right times. You answered when addressed. But you were no longer steering the rhythm. And perhaps what struck you most was this. No one seemed to notice the shift except you. Here is what is rarely spoken. Influence does not always disappear. Sometimes it becomes quieter, less visible, less requested, but not absent. The world is loud now, fast, certain. It mistakes speed for strength. But you know something about endurance, about decisions made slowly, about consequences that unfold over decades, not days. And even if they consult you less, even if they interrupt more, even if they assume instead of ask, there is a steadiness in you that was not given by their attention and cannot be removed by its reduction. You may not be the first voice in the room anymore, but you are often the most grounded one, and grounding does not beg for recognition. It simply remains. The most difficult emotion in this stage is not anger. It is invisibility. Not total invisibility, just partial, like being slightly out of focus in a photograph, present, but softened. And the man who feels this rarely complains, because he has endured worse. He has solved harder problems. He has faced real crises. So he tells himself this is small. But small shifts repeated over years reshape identity, from central pillar to background support. And background support is honorable. But it is different. There is something profoundly dignified about not forcing your relevance, about not competing with youth for airtime, about not correcting every assumption. You have nothing to prove, and yet, being unconsulted still lands somewhere in the chest. Not sharply, just quietly. And perhaps the real weight is this. You remember when your presence altered outcomes, and now your presence often observes them. That transition is not weakness. It is time rearranging roles. But rearranging does not mean erasing. If you felt this shift not once, but repeatedly, then what you are experiencing is not your imagination. It is a social repositioning that happens so gradually most men cannot name it. But you felt it. At the dinner table, in the waiting room, on the phone, in the chair that used to be yours. And perhaps the most powerful thing tonight is simply this. Someone finally noticed it. Not to fix it, not to fight it, but to acknowledge it. You were once the first voice. And even if the room turns to you less often now, the steadiness that made them turn in the first place has not left you. It sits with you still, quiet, observing, unannounced, but intact.